Here, the flight sergeant was in charge. In due course, officers turned up, full dress, cap and swords dangling at the waist. Next point was the flight sergeant brought us all to attention and split us all into separate units so that every officer had a squad of his own. In each case, each squad was then ordered to attention whilst the officer drew his sword and faced the standard. In due course, every unit on parade faced the standard with an officer and sword drawn in salute to the standard. Then the station master, station commander came on parade, took the salute from the officers, and in due course each officer led on, making a circuit so that he followed each unit. So we all passed the senior officer and marched out. When we had come away from what we call the parade ground, we once again was taken and given orders by these recruited officers and dismissed, whereupon they moved off and we was then marched down to the maintenance unit to carry on doing our job. This was a rather very boring to us, but having looked back, every officer must have had to have done the same thing when he first took his commission. So for me, Heywood was Toddy's Air Force, in charge, and all the new recruits that came in and all the new recruit officers. And how in due course I was posted away from the Heywood, and I was sent out to the School of Technical Training at Halton, which to me, no idea where it was. But in due course, having travelled with my little chitty down to London, from London back to Buckinghamshire, and then to Halton, where a coach was waiting for all the new recruits. It turned out that I was only one of the units of new recruits. Here at Halton was where I first came into contact with even more discipline. Today, Halton is still training new recruits into the services, both male and female. But when I first went there was no females. And whilst I was there, they appeared. This caused quite a lot of trouble in the time I was there, separating and keeping the girls from the boys. But as time went by, things settled down and we started the proper training, technical training on aircraft engines. Once again, a Park Street training on the Merlin, Royce Merlin, which they had there, was in front of me again. And I did know parts of it where the other chaps had no idea what they were. Our training was very strict again. Once again, a mistake and you could have a serious accident. As time went by, the time came it was Christmas. First Christmas away from home, knew nobody, nowhere to go. Here I piled up with two other chaps, both called Harry, and my name Harold was then changed to Harry, so we became known as the three Harrys, 1, 2 and 3. Where one was, you found the other two, and all the time we was at Halton, we stuck together, going down into the town where we enjoyed our company, our drinks and laughs, and going to the dances and what have you. But whilst we was there, Christmas came. As I say, here the station commander did have a Christmas dance. One of the lads, Harry, bet me I daren't dance with the CEO's wife. He made a mistake. I did go, and I did walk across the dance hall on my own, everybody watching me, and asked the CEO's wife for a dance. The CEO being the group captain of the station, which she acknowledged. So we led off the dance at that particular moment. Having survived it and came back to the lads, I didn't know what to do or how I'd had the guts to do it. But it did prove to myself, if I set myself, I can do it. And once again, the challenge was overcome. From everybody else, I got respect and admiration from my two other Harrys, which once again was a great deal of help to me, because we were still on the trainee recruits being shouted at on parade every morning. Coming to the parade at Halton, there are two parades, one with a brass band and one with a pipe band, doing alternative weeks, and on parade every morning a big billy goat with his medals on and his coat over his back with the Halton mascot on it. This billy goat had his horn polished, his hooves polished. The next station I was posted, when I was posted from Halton, having completed my flight mechs course, the place I was posted to was Coltishall in Norfolk. This was a fighterdrome where I joined the first real aircraft, the squadron being 64 Squadron, or technically known as 6064. At Coltishall, it was in Norfolk where all the bombers used to take off at the evening time to go out to the bomb in Germany. We listened to them every evening. Our job as a fighter squadron was to protect the coastline and make recce visits to see what was happening at sea, and also available to escort any daylight bombers on the way back who were in trouble. 64 Squadron was what I learned later was as being stood down from the fighting on the Channel coast. What brought this to me was the fact that we only had 6 Spitfires and 6 Hurricanes. These, I was to learn, was new training aircraft for the pilots, or should I say retraining the new pilots who were replacing those lost down at the channel. The Hurricane was one of the fighters that was actually covered in fabric and not metal. It damaged on any of the fabrics, and all it needed was a gun patch, what we named as gun patch, which was stuck over the split or a hole, whichever it may be. Whereas with the Spitfire Mark V's, they were metal and riveted. The thing that I became aware of was speed at this 64 Squadron. Our CO, I can't give you his name, but he had us all filing all the round-headed rivets on the aircraft off, which we were wondering why. And I later found out that all aircraft had flat rivets on the metal skins. We actually found out from our CO, after he'd had us take all the rounded rivets off by filing them and repainting and remarking the aircraft, they went up into the inner aircraft and tried it to see what the speed was. To my knowledge, or what I was told, that they'd gained between 5 to 10 mile an hour. This doesn't sound a lot, but when in combat, I could well imagine it did make a lot of difference. At Coltishall, I had two experiences really. The first was finding out about petrol. Having not had any use for petrol prior to going into the services. This petrol was of a higher octane than the ordinary motor car. And what used to happen was the aircraft would take off, come in, and both the airframe lads and myself as the engine all mucked in to take the flaps off the covers of the petrol tanks and help them to refill as soon as possible. This was done on a regular habit. On this particular day that I'd like to mention was we did have a squadron stood by, and we were put on to what was known 20-minute readiness. In the process of checking the aircraft, we had to top up all the aircraft petrol tanks. In the process of going round, we found that the little engine, ordinary petrol engine at the rear of the tanker, had run out of petrol. So one bright spark decided to fill it up with the aircraft petrol, having tried to squirt out of the large nozzle into a small tank. Anyway, it was done. And what happened next was really amazing. Upon putting the handle in to wind the engine up at the rear, there was one big flash and a bang. What had happened was some of the petrol had sunk into the well where the flywheel was. There should have been a hole there, but it was blocked up. So a pool of petrol had got there instead. With the petrol flying up on the flywheel, it went straight to the spark plug in the side of the cylinder. The result was one almighty big bang, and the whole of the rear of the tanker was ablaze. And full credit to the person who jumped onto the tractor and started full belt into the middle of the airfield. Alarm bells rang, and in the process the fire brigade went out. Unfortunately, they did get the fire out and kept it so it did not reach the full big petrol tanks. This, as I say, was my first lesson in petrol. A little later on, we had an incident where we had one of the Spips had been attacked by a German fighter. Having chased him, the Spit dived and hit the sea. The German pilot, seeing all the spray go, steered away and stayed off home. Amazingly enough, the pilot managed to pull the aircraft up off the waves and started heading for home, complaining of an unstable engine. At the station, 2 aircraft were scrambled immediately, one the CO, and they went out to meet him and escorted him back to our dispersal. On stopping his engine and having complained about a rough engine, as we looked at the aircraft, all the yellow parts of the end of the tips of the propellers were missing. Having hit the water so hard, he had brought them all off, and one of the props was slightly split. No wonder he complained about it being a rough engine, but it did bring him back home to our Coltishall, and everyone was amazed. But in the process, de Havilland came immediately and removed that propeller. This is many years ago, so it's just one incident. This pilot was very lucky to have come away alive. The second instance that I'd like to mention about the petrol was concerning myself. Having been, once again, in a situation where all aircraft was brought to full readiness, we had filled the tanks, wiped the wings down, and stood by. As we walked back, and I went into the huts, wooden huts, to sit with the lads. As I walked past an open fire, which, as in every station they had them, which was a wood come coal cinder fire, which had a flap in the front at the top and a flap at the bottom to let the draft in, and a pipe up out into the roof. As I walked past it, there was a flash, and I was in flames from top to bottom. With that, I hurtled out of the hut, rolled on the floor in the grass, and fortunately for me, the lads knew the drill and threw the fire blanket over the top of me. When I came out, I found I had no eyebrows and no whiskers on, very few whiskers on my head. I have been very fortunate to get away with such minor injuries. This was my final warning about petrol. Never take it for granted. You can't see it, but it is there, and it can go up in a flash. But on these 2 occasions, as I say, all went well. As for Coltishall being there, it was a nice place. There was Norwich out in the distance, and here, in actual fact, I did finish up in jail, strangely enough, being posted to Coltishall. this little thought has just come back into my mind.